Okay.
Well, hello and welcome back to another edition of the Andrew Eborn Show, and I am absolutely thrilled that tonight I'm joined by my old mate, Ray Williams. How are you, Ray?
I'm terribly well. How are you?
I have to say you are looking terribly well, and it's been far too long. How long's it been?
Oh, I don't know, about 8 months.
It feels so much longer. It's always a joy. And what is great about it, you used to live over here in jolly old Blighty. How many years ago did you move?
11 years, just over 11 years ago.
Is it really 11 years? Because that's
Yeah,
flown by, hasn't it?
I know it has. And
We used to spend, just remind everybody how we know each other.
gosh, we originally met through, I think, BMI.
It was BMI, and it was
And
on the golf course, no
it was on
less.
the golf course at the RAC club, wasn't it?
It was indeed. And we did that
Yeah.
for a fantastic BMO golfing day. The great, the good, and the unwashed from the music
Yep.
industry would gather at least once a year to play golf at this glorious RAC club. And you were pretty good at golf, and I think I'd probably still be going round if I hadn't gone for that vacant
I
Saturday.
was, I was pretty rubbish. I'm actually better now.
How are you? What's your handicap now?
Oh, it's, I don't know, it's only about 13 or something.
Well, 13's tremendous. I think I do 13 on every hole. I think that's basically it. So it's always a joy. But you moved 11 years ago to Raleigh.
Yeah, just over about 11 and a half years ago, actually. And we moved to Chapel Hill, which is part of the Research Triangle, which is made up of Raleigh and Durham and Chapel Hill.
Oh.
And yeah, it's a very cool place and less stressful than, say, many parts of America, such as LA or New York or London. There's a bit of space around you, so you can get from A to B fairly quickly, and it's good. And it's a great point for, you can fly off to New York, you can fly to Nashville, Atlanta, and you can go to LA, and you get all and direct to Europe. So it's a great.
It's a great hub for you, isn't it?
Right.
And what I love about it is you still pop back here, and we meet up for our glorious lunches and dinners and various other things when you come over here. How often do you come and visit us? I think it's at least once a year, isn't it?
Well, last year, I think I came over 6 times.
There you go.
So since we've moved here, I think it's been, I don't know, an average of 4. So I've been backwards and forwards about 45 times. I mean,
45 and a half times over those 11
years. 45 and a half times.
It's always a joy. And what's really fascinating as well, Ray, is looking at life. And why did you move to Raleigh in the first place?
I just, a lot of things I wanted to do. I've been going to America for well over 50 odd years. So I always had close bond with it. And I always thought there was probably a more can-do spirit than, do you know what I mean? And I felt that it was just becoming a bit mundane. So I wanted a new challenge. So that's why I had the opportunity of moving to America. And I took the opportunity working with Butch Lowry and Lowry Music, who originally brought me here 50, I'm scared to say it, but I mean, I was a teenager, so I was very young, and they gave me an opportunity then, and then I had the opportunity of helping them out when they sold their company. I was very much involved with that, and then they came to the end game, and Bill Lowry and his wife Billy Lowry had passed away, and Butch the son asked me if I would come and help him, which I did. They owned a great studio called Southern Tracks, which a lot of famous people have recorded, and a legendary company they were. Anyway, so I came back to help for the first few years, and then I got a green card and stayed here.
I've been there ever since, which is glorious. I have to say, talking about glorious, I have to say you have the glitziest microphone I have seen in the 500 odd interviews that I've done. It's rather fancy. What's that about?
It's very shiny. It's very shiny.
It is shiny.
Because it's not plugged in, actually. I'm using the... I had it plugged in, but you couldn't hear me. And
I see. Isn't that ironic? If you unplug the microphone.
I had to unplug it so you could hear me. Isn't that
weird?
Well,
just as the poster says behind you, it's not my fault.
That's right. My granddaughter built that. She drew that. She's 12 years old. Her name's Bluesy LaRue. What a great name!
Fantastic names. It's really good.
Yeah. So she made that, and so I was very proud of that. And so I stick it up behind my little space here. I recently sold the house, and of course, in this coronavirus time, very difficult and unexpected to sell the house. But it left me unable to find a new house. And so some friends of mine, Ted and Nina Pye, have very kindly allowed me to stay with them. And they should be careful what they wish for. But it really is very kind of them. And so this is my little space. And then I stuck up Bluesy's picture.
I know, fantastic. No, I love it. And does it say COVID-19 underneath it?
Oh, it does. Yes, it does. It does, and it's not my fault, and blah blah blah. And she's very. She lives in California. Her mother Polly, my daughter rather, Polly, and Lucy. They live out in Los Angeles, Beverly Hills, actually.
And it's Billy Burke, is that right?
Yes, that's Bluesy's dad, and they've actually been separated and they got divorced, but they're very, very great friends, and they both are brilliant parents, and we're all in touch still, and so very much part of our lives.
Yeah, and what I love about it is actually when our daughter Chloe was probably Bluesy's age, she was really into the Twilight series, you'll remember. And Billy Burke famously played Bella's father, didn't he, in the whole Twilight series?
And I remember we got Chloe a nice picture.
You not only got her a picture, you very kindly arranged for her to go to one of the premieres of one of the Twilight series.
That's right. And
so, we had a fantastic time. And is Bluesy, is she also into the Twilight series?
No, she's doing quite well. She had a little appearance in a couple of films. She's a very talented young lady. I mean, she wants to be a musician and an actress, and so she's also an incredible dancer. So music, theatre, films is going to be her life.
That's fantastic. And it's obviously, so the Ray Williams genes have certainly travelled all the way down to your granddaughter as well, which is fantastic. So interesting. I mean, I've known you for zillions of years, Ray, and it's always interesting when you find out new bits about people. And I know we've spoken about your career at length several times in the various car journeys we've shared in and out of London to various golf courses and lunches and glorious things like that. But let me take you back to how it all started. Tell me about you as a little one. Probably, where did you grow up?
I grew up very close to Heathrow Airport. And in fact, one of the nearest homes to the main entrance. And
that must have been a bit noisy, wasn't it? Was that by choice?
Oh, you got to remember back in, well, I was born a long time ago, but we're talking, I lived there about 1951, 52. And so you didn't have jets flying around then. You know, you had propeller aircraft. And just across the road is where the Queen would take off. They had the old VIP lounge there, and you would see Winston Churchill greeted in his Knight of the Garter outfit, meeting and greeting people. And you just walked across the road, and you would see these dignitaries, you know, roped off. So it was amazing. I remember seeing the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh take off in an Argonaut. And there was another great thing there, that they had like a big pedestrian. There was no tunnel at Heathrow Airport at that time. It was just you just walked across the road, the Bath Road, near the, there's a pub that's still there. It's been there since the 16th century or 17th century, called the Three Magpies. And there was no fences, but you literally, there was a large pedestrian crossing to get to the middle of the airport. And a guy with a couple of bats would stand there, stopping the aircraft to allow people to go backwards and forwards. So it was, yeah, very different days. So it was much different. And then the jets came in. The first, who was it? It was Pan Am, wasn't it? They sent a 707 over across the Atlantic. And yeah, that was the start of the noise.
Yes, and that must be extraordinary. So 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl for the Three Magpies, wasn't it? So did you find out the story as to why it was that one?
Did I what? Sorry.
Did you find out the story of why it was called the Three Magpies?
Never had any idea, because opposite that were just fields. It was all farmland around there. And then there was a Sunday school run by a lady called Mrs. Butler. and who'd been in Africa in missionaries, and so there was always interesting stories, with her and her sidekick. But it was all fields, and now of course it became the Excelsior Hotel, didn't it? Yeah. And it's the Park Inn or something.
Oh, there are many hotels around there. So why did your parents pick that particular location?
Well, because we'd been living in Gloucestershire, in a place called Cinderford, and I think it was my dad got a job nearby, and so it became a place to find a house. Well, in those days there weren't many houses, and so that was the one. It was the nearest house to the Bath Road and Heathrow Airport. It was amazing.
No, very good. And was it a happy childhood for you? Did you enjoy growing up?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it was a very strict upbringing I had, very Victorian. And maybe that's why I decided to leave school early and get out in the big wide world. They wanted me to work for somebody like who was up the road, Gillette, and they probably wanted me to be a draftsman or an engineer, and I couldn't do with that. And I remember leaving school and I had a Saturday job where I in a place called Useley, where I used to work in a hardware store delivering paraffin and stacking wood, and Ronnie Wood was one of the guys that was around at that time. So, and Kim Gardner from Ashton, Gardner and Dyke. And so we all used to hang out when we were teenagers, and they had a band called The Birds, BIRDS. So we would, 14, 15 at that age. And I eventually just left school, and one of the people I delivered paraffin to was a guy called Campbell Orange and his wife, who worked for BOAC. And I got this job. They wanted an office boy, so I got this job as an office boy for a short while. And the guy interviewed me was this guy called Campbell Orange, so I got the job immediately. And it was during that time that I met a lot of interesting people, and I'd been following a band called Cliff Bennett and the Rebel Rousers. And the combination of working in London that short while, I suddenly went to a gig that they were playing at, and that's where I met Kathy McGowan when she invited them to go on Ready, Steady, Go. And then I became her little sidekick and helped. I suppose today you would call it like an intern. Somebody that worked for nothing, and
so you didn't get paid on Ready, Steady, Go?
No, but they would take care of me, and I would. They did a lot of I was a mod, and I used to appear in Mods Monthly,
Right.
which is Kathy and Vicky Wickham's paper, and I would do things like Titbits and and just lots of little, Life magazine and all sorts of things. And then I would go with them to places like Brighton and Streatham to pick young people to go on the show, as I was typically a young person. And yeah, I remember going to, where did we go? Oh, it was the Golden Lion TV thing in Montreux.
Oh yes, no, fantastic, yeah.
And Ready Steady Go was a guest show that they put on. And so a plane load of us went over there with the team, I think Keith Fordyce and Kathy. And I think it was the first time the Rolling Stones ever played a gig, because they were the guests. It was Petula Clark, the Rolling Stones, a French band called Les Surfs, and Kenny Lynch. And it was hilarious. And so, suddenly I was in, I got my first proper job working really, and Kathy organized this, introduced me to Brian Somerville, who was had been the Beatles publicity manager. And they went on from there. He had 3 artists, and that was Sonny and Cher, Kinks, and Tommy Rowe. And then,
And so you help out on. So you were learning the ropes from one of the greats at that particular time, that publicist. What did your role entail? I mean, you were learning, as you say, you learned from Kathy. You were an apprentice there. You weren't paid, but this was a paid job.
I met a lot of people through that, and it gave me a chance of connecting with people. And then when she introduced me to Brian Somerville, that he needed an assistant, and I became his assistant. And
what would that entail?
Well, it entailed, I was assigned to each of the acts that he had at that time to go and do things like delivering press releases to Disc and Melody Maker. And so I got to know all those journalists of the day, Ray Coleman, Peter Jones, Mike Ledgerwood, Keith Altham, etc., etc. So I was there, for example, with the Kinks. One of my first tasks was to go with them to Streatham Locarno to pick up a gold record for You Really Got Me. And I had to go with them and report on any stories that I could report back to him to put in the music papers. And so anyway, we built a great relationship with them, always liked them very much. And then with Sonny and Cher, I was assigned to go to the airport and meet them. And then we ended up going to the hotel that we were checking into in Mayfair. And they wouldn't let Sonny and Cher in because Sonny was not appropriately dressed.
What was he wearing?
He was wearing a bob coat, sort of waistcoat, bobcat waistcoat. They didn't think that was appropriate, so we got kicked out. And that was a great story because suddenly we were able to cuddle up a story, run it down to the Evening Standard, and we had a big story that afternoon, and it all worked out rather well. And then with Tommy Rowe, I was assigned to go on tour with, for those that don't know, Tommy was quite a big star in the day because his first tour with Chris Montez, the Beatles were the support act. And so the next time they came over, it was Tommy and Cilla Black and PJ Proby. And I was assigned to go on that tour and just hang out and give press tidbits back to Brian, who'd feed them. And after a few gigs, PJ Proby had been splitting his pants on stage deliberately. And but people at the time didn't realize that. And the guy who was the general manager of ABC, the chain, I think it was at that time, I think it was an Arthur Howe's tour, put these wonderful tours together. And when we got to Wigan, PJ Proby had been kicked off. He'd been booted off because it was inappropriate to split your pants in front of a family audience. And so they brought this new guy on, and it happened to be Tom Jones.
That's not unusual.
It's not unusual. And that was the thing that was released that week. And so we saw that go to #1 in the space of a week. And anyway, Tommy said, "I'd like you to work for me, and I'm going to talk to my manager, Bill Lowry." And bottom line of it was, I ended up going to work for Bill and Tommy in Atlanta, and then I became their guy to look after their songs. And their umbrella at that time was Chapel Music. So I got to meet some very interesting people in those days.
Oh, fascinating. And at this stage, you were still a youngster, though, weren't you?
Yes, I was still a teenager, and then basically I got back into some PR again, as well as doing that, because there was so much I could do. But I got offered to do PR for Sonny and Cher and for Cream, and then I became Cream's press guy, which was fantastic. And we had a number of people that we looked after, with two other guys, Simon Hayes and Ben Stagg, and then another guy joined us called Alan McDougall. So Alan looked after the Hollies, and we had the Savile Theatre, which Brian Epstein had set up. Yeah, we had lots of great stuff, Radio London and Radio Britain and all sorts of weird gear.
And it's curious. And when you're looking after these artists and you're looking for the way of grabbing the press, as you say, lots is to do with relationships with the journalists. What would make a good story?
Well, I mean, there was, it was trying to create, it was really a scam. It was trying to create a situation of, I mean, the Stones was a great story, wasn't it? Where they would go, they were the bad boys, weren't they? So they'd pee up against a petrol station or something like that. Or when we went to Switzerland with Ready Steady Go, they were asked to leave the hotel because they'd been pinching souvenirs from one of the shops. So a lot of this, I mean, Andrew Loog Oldham, who was a great, he was the manager of the Stones at that time, came up with all sorts of wonderful things to make, the Beatles were the good guys and the Stones were bad guys. So you think up pranks to, try and create a story. Like, I think Brian Epstein had put on the Savile Theatre some, I can't remember, it might have been, is it Merce Cunningham? The Bally Merce Cunningham?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And then there was, over here was Bally Rombert, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Right? And there was a lot of, I remember one of the things we did, we threw a brick, with a message from Merce Cunningham through Bally Rombert's window. I'll never forget it. And it started a controversy. Mitch Mitchell, remember Mitch Mitchell? He used to play with Jimi Hendrix. Well, he was a great mate, and he had a band. And really silly story. I remember he came in with his band, and he said, "You know what? We've got some pet ducks that we're keeping." I said, "Really?" So I said, "Well, maybe we could get you kicked out for keeping pet ducks in the house." And this was somewhere in near Victoria. And I remember we organized that they had these ducks in the little garden and getting somebody to complain to the RSPCA. The RSPCA turned up. And so we had a story about this rock and roll band keeping ducks. And it's silly.
And this is the great thing about it. Even people only started talking about fake news now and that the media spin. But in the good old days, it was about grabbing the headlines and just being honest about it. Wasn't saying, okay, I want you to do this. Let's start a bit of controversy. A lot of it was manufactured, wasn't it?
Of course it was. And but it was also important in those days that there were little sections in music papers, such as the NME, New Musical Express, where they had a thing called the face. And the face was little snippet, little tidbits of stories or start of stories. So Pete Quaife was now going out, was in the Kinks, was going out with somebody. Ray Davies was going to have a secret marriage to a girl from Lithuania. And it was, the thing was to try and get little snippets into these things to get people talking. And of course, at the end of the day, we all got roped in to being in there too, which was cool, and we loved it, But anyway, that was that particular period, so it was very interesting. And then
it's a great time, isn't it? Because you're bonding with these people all the time. You're coming up with wonderful wheezes to get in the press. So it's like being back at school, but it's those wonderful sort of pranks where you're playing with them.
I was still young enough to be at school too.
Yeah.
So it was also hanging out with. So part of the job was hanging out at Deham's, the pub in the West End. And you would hang out there with all the guys, actually. I mean, Peter Jones, Richard Green. God, there's so many. Penny Valentine, I remember, bless her. And you would all hang out, and you would all, I remember when Chelsea got, we made it to the FA Cup. And we, as a group of people from Deham's, organised a coach party, and we all went to Wembley to see Chelsea, who I'd supported since I was a baby. And we went to Wembley Stadium, and it was a draw with Leeds United. So we hired another coach to go up to Manchester United, where the replay was. And I remember all of us, all the journalists in one coat. It was just fantastic. And some PR guys. And I remember we went to the match, we got pretty drunk, and we put, the coach was parked at the Manchester Ship Canal. The biggest problem was none of us could find our way back after Chelsea beat Leeds in the replay. We couldn't find our way back to the Manchester Ship Canal. And we were just, the primo journalists of the day, all of us were absolutely lost in Manchester.
That's fantastic. And who ran that story? That's the one where fact is stranger than fiction.
Well, I think there was a toned down version which appeared in possibly in Music Week. What was it? Before Music Week, what was it called? It was called Record
Melody Maker, and you had
no, Record Mirror, Melody Maker, Disc, NME.
Yeah.
Later on, you had the International Times, and But
I love the fact that the real versions get toned down, because it is, and it's interesting when we come onto the press in a bit, that you have that sort of understanding. There are certain stories that you have to turn down, and other stories where you tone them up, don't you?
Yeah, but that's, I guess, one of the great things was there was a great camaraderie between all of us, and many of the, and to this day, people, Keith Altham is still a great mate. We, in our day, we played soccer together, and bless him. Nigel Hunter is another one that's still there. Chris Welsh, from Melody Maker. All these people have been friends for, 50 years or more. It's amazing.
And it's incredible, right? And I think the other thing, which I say a lot of people sort of, they hint at it, but they don't really understand unless you're necessarily in it and hear the stories. But because there is this relationship with the press, they will agree that there are certain stories they will run and certain stories they won't run. And I think there is that sort of relationship when you're creating an artist, which is what you were doing with those fantastic names, is you would work very closely with the people. You'll feed them stories, even if some of them are made up, because it will know it will get their job done. It will sell the column inches. If you want to, as P.T. Barnum said, if you want to draw a crowd, start a fight. So you make sure they sort of conflicts sort of start and everything else.
Yeah.
But you'd also drip feed certain stories on the basis that they don't feed all of necessarily the true stories. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that was fair enough in those days. Yeah, I think, and then you know, some stories you know, couldn't help. I mean, when Ray and Dave Davis were fighting on a stage in America, you can't hide that sort of thing, you know. But yeah, they were just amazing times. And then
I'm many happy memories. I can see. I know we've chatted at length about that sort of stuff. And but what's also good is some things when we're talking about history is making sure that actually the correct version of history is set out. And I know, talking in particular about your next stage when you moved from the PR side to go and work for Liberty Records as A&R. Talk to me about how that transition came about.
That came about because a guy called Bob Reisdorf, who was he had a record label in America called Dalton Records, and he'd sold it to Al Bennett, who owned Liberty Records. And of course, famously, they had the Chipmunks and Vicky Carr, the Fifth Dimension, and they owned Blue Note, they owned Imperial. They were, you know, pretty cool label. And they wanted to open an office in the UK. So they asked Bob, who they'd bought Dalton Records, if he would come and open up an office in London. And when he did that, they were going to use, I think, Philips back in the old day as a distributor. And somehow I got this phone call. And I think it had come from, I think somebody had, I think it was Peter Brown, who worked for NEMS, Brian Epstein's company. He'd asked around about people he could hire. And my name came up, I think, and I was asked if I'd go and interview for head of A&R. So I went along and went through the interview, and I guess I dropped a few names or whatever, but I mean, I got the job. And
but you had some great names to drop. I mean, but bearing in mind you were 20, you just turned 20.
I lied about my age because I was still, I think I was still 18, 19.
Right.
I was 19. Yeah, I was really 19 because, yeah, I'll come on to that in a minute. But I was very conscious of the fact I looked young and it wasn't old enough to be doing this. And I remember getting the job. I was introduced to the other people that Bob had hired, including a lovely old promotion guy called Ronnie Bell and Andrew Lauder, who became a great A&R man himself. And, you know, and a couple of other people. And I suddenly realized I'm an A&R man. And George Martin is an A&R man who really is a proper A&R man who can play a musician. I mean, he's articulate, unlike me. And he's got all this stuff. And I thought, what am I going to do? Well, the thing about A&R is that you had to find talent. And I'd been around it. I'd been very lucky, you know, with working with the guys in Atlanta, you know, the great writers, Joe South, and great artists around, Buddy Bowie, you know, and all the people I'd met in the UK, none less than Ray Davis, and wonderful writers. So I had a bit of an ear for that. And so I decided to put this ad in the New Musical Express, looking for talent. And that day was actually, it was it's an anniversary today
I
because
know. I wondered when you were going to spot that, because it was the
it's
17th of June, 1967.
1960.
And today,
Yeah,
53 years on, why do you
yeah.
think we organised it for today? So happy anniversary.
Well,
53 years on, the 17th of June, 2020, that was when the ad appeared. So it is 53 years ago to this nanosecond that
good
that
job.
musical, in the new NME, it appeared, didn't it? And what did the
Yeah.
ad say?
Oh, it said Liberty Records looking for talent, composer.
Liberty wants talent. You know,
What
this isn't
yeah,
before Britain's Got
yeah.
Talent or America's Got Talent.
Yeah.
Liberty wants talent. I love it. It's got to be good.
And so yeah, respond to Ray Williams, 11 Albemarle Street, and some dodgy telephone number, and basically, you know, as you know, I had thousands and thousands of letters, responses, and my enthusiasm allowed me to answer everything. Oh, it was a nightmare, but it was great because I signed a lot of people at that time. I signed Jeff Lynne in the Idol Race, which was fantastic. I signed Mike Batt, who obviously has written a lot of stuff. He's still a great mate. I signed the Bonzo Dog Doodah band, Gorillaz, an incredible band.
Vivian Stanshaw, absolutely
Vivian
amazing.
Stanfield, oh yeah. And then Family, I signed Family, and yeah, in fact, John Gilbert, who managed them, became important a little way longer. And then I had Bernie and Elton John and Bernie Taupin, and basically, yeah. So my company, after I made demos with Elton, didn't like them. So I said, well, I want to help you, and I had some lyrics from Bernie Taupin. He'd written to me, and he said, I'm essentially a poet, and I would like, I think my lyrics could be set to music, but I don't know where to go to. And if you could help, it would be great. And I wrote to him, I said, well, they're really interested. Why don't you come down and see me? And that's what happened. And then when I was at the point of where I was trying to help Elton, I sent him to two other writers, Kirk Duncan and Nicky James, who I'd hired a piano in my apartment to help them. But it was just one of those things. And that's where I introduced them to Elton. And then I gave Elton the lyrics, because the bell went off. Elton couldn't write lyrics and Bertie couldn't write music. So I thought it might be a good idea to introduce them. And that's what I did.
Fantastic. Well, talk to me, just take me back just a little bit before the introduction. So Elton John came in for the first audition. Talk me through that day.
Well, he came in, and he'd written to me, and he said that he wanted to try, and he was in bluesology, and he wanted to sing more. And Long John Baldry would only let him do maybe a couple of songs, and while he was off having a pee or something, and he was doing the backing vocals, and he was a great keyboard player. And I had him come down. He sat down in a chair opposite me, and we started talking, and I felt sympathetic for him because he didn't look like a rock and roll star. And that's when we got talking. He said, look, I've even got a name, Elton John,
Because he came to you as Reg Dwight, didn't he?
Reg Dwight, but he had a name. He had another name.
Where did he come up with the name? Did he tell you where he came up with the name?
Yeah. So one was the Elton part was Elton Dean, who was in the band, and the John part was Long John Baldry. And so, and I think originally he had the idea of John Elton, I think it was, and I think it was turned around. I'm not sure who did that, but anyway, it was turned around, and when he came to me, he said, that's what I want my name to be. And that was it. So we talked, and I said, well, go and play the piano, play me some stuff. And that's where we really established he couldn't write anything. And so he sang a Jim Reeves song, He'll Have to Go. And ironically, years later, 1992, when sadly Dee Murray passed away, there was a special event at the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville. And of course, one of the things, it was Elton and his piano. And one of the things he sang that brought the roof down, ironically, was He'll Have to Go. And yeah, that was a very tearful moment. I mean, actually, if he'd released that, that could have been a hit. I know it sounds weird, but he did such a great version of it.
Well, there's still time, you know. This could be something you could encourage.
I think he can't wait to get back to his tour, for that amazing show of his. It is amazing.
And as you say, well, the first time he came in, then he was feeling a bit lost. He didn't like being a backing singer very much.
He was lost, exactly that. He said, "I feel lost." I remember that,
And so this is really his sort of opportunity to be an artist in his own right, because he didn't want to be a backing singer, as
no.
his basis. But in order to make that work, you had to introduce him to Bernie. And when those relationships first started, I think Elton was up in Pinner, wasn't he? And Bernie was over in Lincoln. So it's sort of correspondence.
So it was a correspondence. In fact, it's continued to be a correspondence affair, in as much that it just worked. It just worked that when Bernie sent those lyrics, he was able to come up, because he was such a brilliant piano player. And he was classically trained, and so therefore he had all the abilities for creating creating great music, but he also had a great eclectic ear. I mean, he was apart from being a great classical pianist, he knew everything about the music of the day. That's why he had a part-time job at Mills Music, and so he could hang around records. It was amazing.
And anyway, in terms of the process, how would it work? Would people always ask this? Did Bernie write the lyrics first, and then Elton would do the tune? How did it work?
Well, it did, because without any lyrics, there was no tune. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There was nothing for Elton to write to. So that became the way that they started to write. And then as time moved on with Nicky and Kirk, then we all knew Graham Nash quite well. And that's when Graham said, well, I'd been trying to help them with Nicky and Kirk. And then Graham said, well, why don't we do something with Gralto, which is the name of their publishing company, Graham, Allen and Tony, right. Gralto. And so we said, yeah, let's that's a good idea. So we'll call ourselves Naraki, Nicky, Ray and Kirk. And that is how the ball started. And so Graham said, I'm going to get Reg Elton via their deal with Dick James. And that's how the relationship started. And then they started.
You were, at that age, you were still quite a youngster. And I mean, Elton, in his book, we have his book here, it's a fantastic. Yeah. He gives you a number of mentions, but he says that Ray Williams was on the other side of the desk, and he was a very blonde, very handsome, very well dressed, and very young. How old were you?
Well, I was 19.
And that was the question about whether you could legally sign the artist, because I guess you had to go and make sure.
That's where. So what I would do is I'd get Bob to sign them. Oh, excuse me.
And here's Bob now. It's got to be good. I love the theme tune as well. It's all got to be good. It's just that's the great one to go for, isn't it?
It is. Hang on a second, Steve. I'm on I'm doing something in England.
Doing something in England, in English.
I'm doing an interview. No.
Thank you, Steve. Nice to hear you.
Yeah. I'm in the middle of an interview, Steve. Interview, Steve. Steve's
Interview Steve. Hello, Steve.
What? I'll call you back. Thanks, bye.
Wonderful. Stevie Wonder. We love it when Steve.
Actually, Steve is building an incredible studio very close to here.
Oh, right. Okay.
Which is it's a beautiful studio, and it'll have Atmos system. You'll be able to do film. I mean, it's beautiful. It's on a piece of property he bought, about 60 acres.
Oh, fantastic.
And so one of the things we're able to do is have meetings with plenty of space.
Oh yes, so social distancing. So what are the rules at the moment then where you are?
Well, they're sort of, I guess, so I noticed that I actually had I went and had a test because I'm going to be traveling this weekend to California, and I just didn't want to be going anywhere without being positive I was totally free of this terrible thing. So basically the rules is that, I'm a golf fan, and this house here sits on a golf course, and so we're allowed to play golf. Okay. Because there's a lot of distance between people when they play golf, because some are good and some are bad. Yes. And so it actually works. And there's certain rules, such as if you're using a cart, the carts are washed down before and after. You couldn't go into the club room. Well, they've opened that up now, that you can, but you can only have so many people in there at a time. Most people tend to sit outside because North Carolina is generally very open, beautiful. It's nice to sit outside. The weather's pretty hot, although we've had rain for about 4 days.
Right.
Yeah. So the rules, they're sort of, you got to be careful. If you're in New York, it's much stricter, of course, and so people are really locked down, and they don't enjoy the certain amount of freedom we have. So we're all in little bubbles, if you like. So, we can hang out with family, we can hang out with friends, but everybody's respectful and
social distancing.
Wears gloves and
wears bubbles.
Yeah.
These bubbles over here in the UK, it's the new concept where people, because they've been lonely and in isolation, you can form a bubble with somebody else. But the whole narrative's been a bit bizarre and all very confusing about messages and stuff like that. And obviously in the US, it's done on a state-by-state basis, isn't it?
It is. Every state has its own set of rules. But one of the interesting things about it, apart from dealing with the sale of the house and dealing with that when, you had the removal people come in and you got to get that to a warehouse. I mean, that was sort of weird, everybody sort of walking around 10, 12 feet apart, trying to move out is really, you got about 8 people. It's very weird. But basically, as we've all noticed, the world sort of stopped a bit, hasn't it? It's just stopped. And it's become a real great time for reflection. It's been a great time for cooking. Oh,
you're a good cook, Ray. You've never cooked yet. What do you cook?
Oh, I can cook sea bass, and I can cook roast lamb. I mean, I'm a real British cook, but I love doing it. But the thing about it is more washing up.
I love to cook. The washing up, I sort of disappear quickly. So I've cooked the meal now. We work on that sort of basis. Yeah. So it is interesting. I mean, going back to Elton, and as we say, don't let the truth stand in the way of a good story, is what they always say, as you say, in the early PR days.
Right.
And And I think what's really helpful, and you and I have spoken about this at length, and it is very interesting that that initial sort of moment where you introduced the two of them, that's how it happened. You were a teenager, so effectively you had to get the bosses to do the actual contract and so on and so forth. And talk to me about how you started off as Elton's manager, didn't you? Talk me through that.
All right. So basically, what happened there was the thing was beginning to, it didn't happen overnight, the whole thing, because Bernie and Elton spent nearly, a good 18 months, couple of years making their demos at Dick James with the help of people like Caleb Quay, brilliant guitarist. And he had a lot to do with it. And there was a guy at Dick James called Steve Brown who helped a lot in the between Dick and the label side of things. And so it was it took a bit of time to develop. And what happened was that in the interim, I became before that I became the manager of Jeff Lynne and the Idle Race, and so we had a great time, had a lot of fun, and then Jeff got offered to join the Move, and so the dynamic changed. But during that time, we managed a certain amount of success because we were like a band's band, and they probably get more recognition now than because of ELO than they did at the time. But they had a lot of big fans with all the Radio 1 DJs, and we had a lot of airtime.
And how were you asked to be the manager for Jeff then?
Well, it just happened because, again, I was helping them, and they come down from Birmingham, and I said, well, look, let me help you, and that was it. I became their manager. I've still got all the old paraphernalia that we had and all the old.
I should dig that out. We'll have a look at that next time. We like a bit of paraphernalia.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've got a lot of that stuff, and so I'd been doing that, and then suddenly I get a phone call. Elton and Bernie had always kept in touch. We'd kept in touch all the way through to this point where he rang me up. He said, "Can I come and see you?" And so he and Bernie turned up, and we went to the Duke of Wellington, which is a pub, Duke of Boots.
Absolutely, in down in Belgravia.
That's right. And I was sharing a house with 3-4 other chaps. It was great, it was marvelous, and it was right next door to the American ambassador. It was fantastic, and so they came along, and we went to the Duke of Boots, the Duke of Wellington, and Elton said, "Look, would you manage me? Because Dick has basically, he's signed our publishing, signed the records, he's signed the agency, he's signed everything that you can't do you shouldn't do in those days. And he's offered to sell his management agreement. And he said, you can do it if you can find some money." So my job was to run around to try and find some money for somebody so I could manage Elton John. And I went to various people. Brian Morrison, you remember.
How much was Dick looking for?
Oh, I have no idea. I was looking for anything to get, because you got to remember that probably in his mind, he probably wanted to cover the cost of making an album. And so I guess you were probably looking at sort of, in his mind, somewhere about 8, 9, 10,000 or something like that. And then that was the initial thought. And then I went to Brian Morrison, and Brian Morrison had just entered a deal with NEMS. Brian Epstein had died, and the guy called Vic Lewis was running it. Stigwood had left, and so I remember having a meeting with Vic Lewis, with Brian and all the directors of NEMS. And I said we needed what did I say? I think I said I wanted £25,000 so that we could do this job and etc. Because I wasn't sure what Dick wanted. I always remember Vic Lewis saying, "You mean to say this guy can earn? We're going to have to make £75,000 in a year in order to pay for this and take a cut." I said, "Yeah, you honestly believe that?" I said, "Yes, I do." And I remember everybody, he said, "No way." And I always remember we had an agent, Tony Howard, who was present, brilliant. He looked after T-Rex, Mark Bolan, and lots of people. And he said, I think he can do it. I think they can do it. Brian Morrison said, "Yeah, I think they can do it." And Vic Lewis just wouldn't have it. And then I went to get another guy called John French, who was a hairdresser, who used to cut my hair. It was John French of Mayfair. And he was I think he was in Grosvenor Square. And he had a flatmate called Sharon Shealy, who was a great songwriter, and indeed was in the car crash with Eddie Cochran when he got killed. And she wrote a lot of hit songs for Rick Nelson, and anyway, we all got together, and he was now looking after Jeff Beck. So we came up with an idea. We went to Dick, and the idea was he would come up with some money. But in the meeting, he came up with the fact that Elton should play with Jeff Beck on his American tour. And the conversation stopped when we said, "Well, how much are you going to pay Elton?" And he said 10%. And that was the end of the conversation. And then there were a couple of other things, but we never got the money. And then one day, Dick said to Elton, "Well, why don't I do this with Ray? We'll do it 50-50. And that's what we did. And then eventually, and part of the deal was there'd be an office for me in the Dick James building. And that's how you get that in Rocket Man. But of course, the story had started long before that. And we ended up starting our job of working hard and trying to now promote the Elton John album, which is the 50th anniversary this year. And we started getting TV shows all over Europe and doing all sorts of things. And then obviously the record was sort of to be released in America. And the guy over there, Russ Regan, went crazy over it. And that's when we decided we needed to have a trip to America. And Dick came up with the money so we could do it. So that was the start of that period that led to the appearance at the Troubadour.
And talk to me about that. I mean, an iconic moment. And I've heard lots of different reports. I've heard, obviously, your version of events as well. And it's probably a really good time to set the record straight, because things went a bit downhill, didn't they, with Dick around that time. So it's good to put this in perspective. Talk to me about that.
Well,
that was a very long well. That was a very long well there, Ray Williams.
A lot of well. I mean, basically, all of us as a group of people, you think of, we're a little team of, we were chums, we were friends.
Yeah, you were very, very close to Elton at that stage, weren't you? You were chums, as well as the management and the business relationship, but you were chums.
Yeah, and I think what happened was the American thing came along, and when we got to Los Angeles, I remember, when you look back and think, well, I wouldn't have done that again. But because we were so young, and we had actually gone there as a group, there was Elton, Bernie, Dave Larkham, who did the design for the albums. there was Steve Brown, there was myself, and Bob, the road manager, and I think Roger Greenaway was out there, who was one of the writers and a friend. And basically we went over there, and there was like a couple of days to spare, and I think it was Nigel or Dee. They both wanted a hairdryer, and I said, well, I'll ring up an old girlfriend of mine. And so I made this call to Joanna, and she wasn't there. She was in Europe because I'd introduced her to Sonny and Cher a couple of years ago, and she was now working for Sonny and Cher. But her sister was there. And so I said, I need a hairdryer urgently. And she said, I'll bring it over. And that was, we all got together with this hairdryer, and everyone was meeting everybody. And they said, well, why don't we go to Palm Springs for a trip? What are you doing? And everybody said, yeah, let's go. So it was unanimous. And it ended up that suddenly, as we were about to go, Elton had said, I don't want to go. He was obviously getting nervous. But so we said, okay, well, you stay here. And off we went to Palm Springs. And we came back, and it was during that time, he was talking to Dick in England, and I think there was Dick saw an opportunity that I shouldn't have left or something like that.
Well,
and then that's
Elton feel as though he was deserted, all those sort of things. Play with people when they're all alone. You can say, look, they've left you there. They've left you there.
Yeah. Anyway, it turned out that we got back, and we got on to get ready for the show, and Elton had said, I'm not doing it. And a big argument ensued, and we said, look, Dick's paid for all this money for everybody to come here. And so Elton portrays it in Rocket Man, where he's locked in the loo, and I go and bang on the door and say, get out, you little twat, or whatever it was. And so that was a good theatrical part of some, I was able to encapsulate what was going on at that particular time. And anyway, we got on, and we did the week there. That was amazing. And then we went to San Francisco, where Doug Weston, the owner, had a new troubadour, and there was nobody there at all because it was a totally different vibe, But yeah, and then obviously there was an issue. And then when we got back to England, Elton and I went out, and there was a lot of, I was getting these weird letters from Dick, and I thought, oh.
What did the letters?
I'm not going to say what they are, but I'm just saying they were weird. They were just weird. That will one day come out. But it became a awkward time, And Amarina, my daughter, was 6 months old, and in fact, she's going to be 50 on Friday.
There you go. So it's all
happening, isn't it?
This is the reason we're chatting today, Ray. It's the 53rd anniversary of the original advert. Amarina's going to be 50. It's 50 years since the album. You're 227. All of this.
All happened yesterday. Yeah, all happened
yesterday. I know. Fantastic. Happy birthday for yesterday. And my birthday's on the 7th of July every year.
Okay. I will. Remember that. Yeah.
So it's all good. So it's absolutely, and it shows how close you were, because and you got, again, history says it slightly differently, because Elton in his book, page 88, I remember this, he tells the story about Amarina, and he does say, here we are, he was saying, Ray Williams was a lovely man. I owed him a great deal, and he was incredibly loyal. He even named his daughter Amarina after another of the Tumbleweed Connection songs. Now, what was the order? Did you name it after the song, or was the song named after your daughter?
No. Bernie and Elton came to me They came over to Islington where we had a house in those days, and he said, we got a great name, because he knew that Anna Lee, my wife then, was pregnant. He said, we got a great name if you have a girl. I said, what's that? He said, Amarina. I said, oh, Amorina. And Bernie said, no, Amorreena. And I said, he said, would you call, we want to name her, you to name her if it's a girl. I said, okay, we'll do it. And so I had a girl, and it became Amarina. And so they came up with it as as an idea, and it became a reality. And so Bernie sent a lovely message to Amarina this week. So it's we're all still sort of in good space after all these years. And Elton and I, we met up in November when they were in Charlotte here, and that was fantastic.
And Elton's Amarina's godfather, isn't he?
Well, yes, they were, but I mean, what one of the things
is, godfather. I think he's a godfather. Sorry? They're there between you and God. That's how it works.
Yes, yes, but they were the godfathers at that time, and unfortunately, everybody, suddenly this life, that Elton took on was just amazing, and so we've all gone around in a big circle, and we're all chums again, and
which is lovely, because I lived through, and as I say, shared many a journey with you during that time. And you think it's going back to what Dick may or may not have said in the letters and so on and so forth. Do you think he was poisoning Elton at that stage? Do you think when he was left alone, as he said, in the hotel room, he could play on insecurities and things like that?
Well, there you go. You'll put me in very awkward stuff here. But very simply, if we look at the business as it was then, it was, here you got a young kid, a young guy, so you look at people my age then, now, they're still at university, or they're still at college, they haven't got out of work. But then we were not as experienced as somebody like Dick was. Dick was, he came across as in the film, he didn't come across as a jovial man, but he didn't have as much hair as he did in Rocket Man. That was interesting. But I think, he was probably a hard-nosed businessman, So you have to live with that, learn from that, and carry on. I mean, it was very, very tough after that. Till about, Then I found another band called Steelers Will, which was Jerry Rafferty's band. So that sort of took over that period.
And it was tough with Dick, because you had a contract with Elton.
I did have a contract, and it was essentially torn up.
Yeah, but that's what Dick, he called you to the office and said, no, I'm going to tear it up. And he offered you a bit of money, first of all, kept going up. So 500 quid, and I think it was 900 quid. Then you were there with your young family, with Amarina, coming up to 50 in a few weeks' time. And obviously the pressure when you have a young child and you need the money.
Enormous. It was enormous. And it actually, at the time, it was, Ellen and I had lunch, and we were pretty, we still wanted to be chums. I wasn't really comfortable being a manager. I was quite happy to do it. but it had taken on another life, really, because everybody comes out the woodwork when you saw a bit of talent, and everybody suddenly believes where they didn't believe before. And I remember Vic Lewis, the very same Vic Lewis said that never happened, suddenly becoming Elton's agent again. And, and it's like, what's his name from Brazil, 66, Sergio Mendes. When we were in Paris in the very early days, we got a job of supporting him in Paris on a live Radio Luxembourg show. Well, basically, Sergio gave him no time to rehearse. And we went on stage, and one guy in the audience started booing. And you know the French, one leaves and they all go. And they started to go crazy, booing Elton off. And to his credit and the band's credit, they did the whole show. And then we left very discreetly afterwards. Now, when we couldn't find anybody involved with that had been looking after us, they all disappeared. And we disappeared back to the airport and flew back to England. But the good thing was that about 6 months, 7 or 8 months later, Sergio Mendes suddenly appeared again and suddenly wanted Elton to tour with him in America. But of course, it was like, no way, Jose, So because, yeah, things can change.
Yeah, and talking about change, I mean, Dick, for whatever reason, there was a big falling out. He ripped up contracts and basically I drove a big wedge between, Elton was your chum. And it must really have hurt at that stage, didn't it?
Oh, sure it did. It was very tough. But the good thing is that you can look back at all that and you can try and learn from it. And what was lovely was when we met, way back in '92, when he was doing the One album, and Johnny Versace was, sponsoring that, and we ended up getting together in Paris. We went to the recording session, and he played me the One, and it was really nice, and we had a great dinner. Of course, this was the period that he had given up drugs and had stopped drinking and sobriety, and it was really we talked about being chums and all the rest of it. Well, anyway, move on all these years later, and we met up in Charlotte, and it was great. I mean, he couldn't have been nicer. He did wonderful shout out to me in the audience, and it was great. And then he did a wonderful Instagram after that really was very touching. And yeah.
What did the Instagram say?
Wow, I think it was along the lines of it was great to see Ray, who was something along, was quite important in my life or something. And isn't it wonderful how the circle of life, can come back?
And this is interesting, as we say beforehand, this is why it's so good that people have the opportunity to talk and to question everything. Because going back to your very early stages when you were, if you like, as a press guy, and you'd work with how the media, and we know how the media manipulate things, and it's a game of we help each other out because that's how it works. But getting the story right, and it does hurt because you were chums. And there was a stage where maybe Dick was poisoning that relationship because Elton was left alone. You then find out that Elton's giving interviews where effectively you're some guy who handed over, an unopened envelope with some lyrics. I mean, all that sort of stuff. That must have hurt as well, didn't it?
Well, yeah, I actually got I started to write a book, but I started actually about 6 years ago, and as a working title, I had this. It was called "I'm the Guy."
So, and just I've hinted at the story. Fill in the full story about the guy.
Well, because there was so much reference, and this guy, and and this guy threw this envelope. But it was never that. And but anyway,
it was an interview which was given in, I think, in a magazine, a German magazine or something like that. And they said there was this guy. I'm actually sounds very dismissive of Ray Williams and the role that he played. And it really was to say, we didn't even bother opening the lyrics. He just sort of handed an unopened envelope.
That is the thing. That is the thing that I find weird, because if you read Bernie's book, was it Cradle Full of Heroes, or the very last page, he's talking about his young life in Lincolnshire, and then he said, "Oh, then I answered this ad," or words to this effect. Then I answered this ad, and I met this chap, Raymond Williams, and so that, he explained he'd written, and I'd written to him, inviting him to come down, and so I've never understood the guy bit, or even the question of did I read the lyrics? Sure, I read the lyrics. Sure, I responded. That was, but anyway, that's all done now. So.
Well, no, but that's why I think it's important just to tidy that up, because you are in a great place with Elton now, which is lovely. But you wrote, and obviously you're very upset, very hurt. This is your chum, and you wrote to Elton, and you got a response from Frank Preston, I think.
Well, yeah. There's so originally there was it started going back when in 1991, when John Reed was still there, and there was something I'd done a thing for them called Two Rooms, and there was an issue there, and I just remember writing and just saying, well, look, I just don't understand that, the way that your people are dealing with this, Anyway, I don't want to get into that too much, but the bottom line of it was, whenever there was an issue like that, at least at the end there, Elton addressed it, and that was great. And more recently, this is one of the reasons that we got together, because other things have been, I know things have been written, but without getting into the detail of it,
Well, as you said, and this is why it's interesting bringing it full circle, because as you say, a lot of things get written. Never let the truth stand in the way of a good story.
Exactly.
Which is why I think it's really good to question everything. And remembering the positive side, you were great mates. You discovered Elton. You put Elton together with Bernie. That's all very clear. And that's why it's very important to sort of say that stuff. When you were invited to come on and see Elton, talk me about that, because that's fairly recent. And I've lived... as I said, I've known you for many years. It's been a real pleasure. We've done lots of things, and I think it must have been such a relief that actually, after all this time, he's reaching out and saying, "Look, come along and watch me at the concert." Talk to me how that came about.
Well, it really all came about when Rocket Man. I was watching the Academy Awards, not the last ones, the year before.
Yeah.
And
it's like an eternity ago, doesn't it?
It does, forever. And I was here. I was on my own. I had a glass of wine, and I was watching the Academy Awards. And then suddenly there's an ad break, and it says, "Coming soon, the amazing story of, Rocket Man." And then they showed a clip, and there's a guy there with his feet up on the table, and he says, "What's your name in?" And I said, "That could be me." And it was Charlie Rowe playing me. And I remember getting on my laptop and put, "Who plays Ray Williams in Rocket Man?" And it was Charlie Rowe. And I said, "That is me." And then obviously it didn't come out until May at the film festival, did it last year. And that's when I think Elton was coming to Raleigh. I just got back from England because Raleigh's down the road for us here. And I just wrote a note to Bernie. I said, you know what? I know it's short notice, but I'd love to come and see the show. And so things were passed on, but I didn't hear until a day afterwards. It was too late, but they very generously, really lovely note, asked me if I would come to Charlotte, and that's what we did. And so we met up there, and we walked in, and Elton, he's like a big hugger, and it was fantastic, and it was just such a lovely moment. And it was I had my two friends that I'm staying with now. I took them along, and I took my intern along, and it blew their mind that it was lovely the way that he looked after everything. It was great. And it was great. What can I say?
No, I think I always like, firstly, I like resolution. And as you know, it's always, and having known you for several years, I know how important it was. And I was just so delighted to read really positive things in the book about Ray Williams, these sort of acknowledgement there, but also the movie and that sort of side where you're portrayed. And we'll come on to that in a bit, but also to hear that Elton reached out to you and said, look, this is good. And I think getting resolution after all this time is very valuable, isn't it?
It is. It's very nice. And of course, for years, I mean, I did this a long time ago. I've had other careers in between that. And in fact, a lot of people didn't know I had anything to do with Elton John. They always thought I was a music supervisor for 20 years.
Yeah, you worked on some fantastic movies. Tell us the movies.
Oh, I mean, smaller films like Saving Grace, which I always loved, and The Last Emperor, the Bertolucci film. I mean, lots of them. I did about 70 of them, I think, films and TV things. And so a lot of people know me for that. But I mean, it's very nice to resurrect it, if you like, the story about Elton. And it's been good for me, actually. It's been very good for me.
And it's been fantastic. And I cherish the little posts on Facebook with Facebook chums as well as chums in real life. So I love that sort of stuff. And what's also great, Ray, as well, is that having reached out about that sort of stuff, people always know there's a bit of artistic license in the film, whether Bohemian Rhapsody and so on and so forth. How accurate is Rocket Man?
Well, as it's promoted, it's a true fantasy. So, I mean, that is how they promote it. I mean, by doing that, it's a license to put together a musical, and it's a great musical. When it first came out, I had to look at it, and I remember I actually didn't see it till I got back to England, because I remember I came back and I remember going, we have a house in West Sussex near Midhurst, and I remember going down to local cinema to see it. I was sitting there actually on my own, and it was weird, just seeing yourself being played or portrayed. But I think it was in its way, despite the actual story, the way it was set up, I think it was I thought there were some nice things, I don't think I came out of it too badly. And I think there was, and it was nice that they played Amarina in it too. And I thought it was nice. And
were you happy with the casting of you?
Oh, Charlie is a great guy. I've met him a couple of times since then.
When he was preparing for the role, sometimes they go and sit down with the person they're portraying.
Yeah, I said, I asked him actually. I said, how do you feel? Would you have preferred to meet me before, or are you happy like we're meeting now? And he said, well, he said, I did all my homework, you know. And he said, you know, in fact, originally there were Dexter, the director, had asked him to do some extra bits, and so there was fun. There were some fun things in it, and he's an absolute delightful guy. And so I was very happy. He said, actually, in retrospect, I'm glad I've met you now, because I would have been nervous. But we had a couple of great lunches in London when it come over. And in fact, the first time we met, there's a friend of mine called Simon Hannin. And I was going to have lunch with Simon. And he said, do you mind if I bring a guest along? I said, no, absolutely. And then it was about a day beforehand, and he rings me out. He says, I feel guilty. I feel I've got to tell you who the guest is. I said, okay. He said, do you mind having lunch with Charlie Rowe? And so he set it up. I said, well, that would be brilliant. And so we met, and we had the most wonderful lunch, and we sat there for hours talking about stuff. And
did you set him right? Did you tell him what actually happened?
Oh yeah, we had a great chat, and but he's a very sympathetic guy, and he was very cute in it in the film, and there's some good lines, and it's funny. I quite like I quite like where at the end where I sort of fizzle out at the party, the troubadour. And I go in and I say, I'm drunk. I've got the keys. I got the keys. Doug's given me the keys to the car. And yeah. Anyway, so here, there's all good stuff.
Did that happen?
Well, I don't remember the car bit, but I do. I did know Mama Cass quite well, and I knew the Mamas and Papas back in those days, because I'd known them since, when I was working for Brian Somerville and Sonny and Cher. Cher was great friends with them, and I met them in those days, you know. So Mama Cass and she was funny. She was great. They were the first people to get me stoned. It was amazing. Right. Yeah. How about that?
What was the occasion?
Just turning up at their apartment that they hired for a month. They hired an apartment in Montague Square, and because I was a friend of Cher, they invited me over. And when I got over there, because I'd never done that ever before, I was a very nice young guy, and I remember Denny was sitting on a sofa. He said, do you want some of this? I said, and I was sitting on the floor. And I said, well, I don't smoke. He said, no, you don't understand. He said, what you got to do is you got to sit on the sofa like I am. And you get this and you inhale it and you jump up in the air. I said, oh, that's weird. So, anyway, I tried it. I mean, it was killing me to smoke it. And he said, but you do it 3 times. And he said, third time, it should knock you out. So I was on the floor and I tried it, did nothing, of course. Second time, I was really struggling. And I had a pint of beer that was on the floor. And the third time, I got up, because you're able to get up off the floor in those days at that age and stand up. And I fell back, mostly out of shock. And I missed that pint of beer by about 1 inch. And that was my first time with the Mamas and Papas.
Extraordinary, glorious. And are you in touch with, I mean, you mentioned Cher, obviously Elton. Who are you still in touch with?
Well, I mean, I'm still in touch. I had a nice message the other week with a nice picture from Cher and Joanne. you know, that was rather nice. That was well, actually, it was before this stuff that's going on now. That was great, and I had and the people, you know, like Dave Larkham and Bernie Taupin were still all in touch, and Roger Greenaway, you know, a lot of people from that time.
I'm still in touch with Elton. Have you spoken to him since the concert?
No, we've had some communication, because soon after that he went to Australia, you know, to do the Australian leg, and we would just go, you know, we're just going to keep in touch as and when needed. But there's a lot of things that have been going on, you know, anniversaries and stuff like that. So, you know, I've done some things for which come out with, you know, like Dave Larkham and Caleb Quay and I, we did a great interview together on, you know, one of these online, which was really cool. And Caleb, I'm still in contact with. You know, he became a minister. Caleb Quay, you know, he played with Elton on every album up to about 75, 76. And then he joined Hall & Oates. And then he, you know, with his band, he had Hookfoot before all of that. And then he gave it all up in the 80s, early 80s, and he became a minister. And that's what he is today. And he still plays. He plays with a, you know, sort of jazz funk band, and he's great, wonderful man.
And talking of today, I know that for many years you've been working on Crumbs. Tell us about Crumbs.
Oh gosh. So back in '84, I became a music supervisor and started work. And I did that up to about 2004 or 5. I did it for a long time. And I got peed off about how long it took to clear rights for films. So I thought, I'm going to start, I'm going to try and come up with an idea for having rights pre-cleared. And that's what Crumbs really started to be. But
Crumbs being the small amounts of money they normally get from.
Oh, well, no, the Crumbs. So I owned a few rights that I picked up when I became a music supervisor, because they couldn't afford to pay me or would run out of money. So I picked up some rights, you know. So they were my crumbs. And that's really where that term came from. And so it became crumbs this, crumbs that. And I thought, well, when I start my little company, and that's what I did when I really got here, was to, after I'd worked for Lowry Music over here for 4 years, you know, from 2009 to 13 or whatever it was. That's when I started to get this together. I didn't realize how costly it was. And so we got to a point now, and now we've restructured it a bit, and we've got a bunch of new design, and we've got 5,000-6,000 copyrights. We got rid of some because we didn't think they were strong enough. And so we've basically recreated. I have a partner called Phil Amelong, who's brilliant, was a piano genius as well, but he's an incredible tech guy. And so we're just redoing the skin for the site now. It's geared more to not just pre-cleared licensing, because I thought that would be an easy way for people to get rights, that they wouldn't have to go through lawyers and no disrespect.
I thank you. We'll let you off, but I have worked with you on Crumbs. I will let you off on that one. So it's good.
And so what we're trying to do now, where we live here, there's a number of great media folks that, you know, there's production companies like Figure 8 Films, which is owned by Bill Hayes, and Bill has made about 1,000 programs. I mean, he started off about 35 years ago creating the thing called The Operation. You know that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's an incredible series. And then he's done Kate plus whatever, how many children she has, and he's done many the Conjoined Twins. I mean, he's just a brilliant filmmaker. And then he and this lovely lady Erin, who used to work for Ridley Tony Scott, they have a lovely company called Thunder Mountain. So there's about 6 companies, including the film festival that was started 2 years ago in Chapel Hill called Film Fest 919, which is the area code here. So, and then there's a beautiful studio being built, which I mentioned earlier. And he was a guy who rang us. Steve rang
yes,
us.
absolutely. Good old Steve. He only rang to remind you to give him a plug. I think that's the reason.
I think it was, yes. And basically, and there's a thing called Idea Block, which is a blockchain. Anyway, we've all created a little ecosystem. And we're all working and all trying to help each other during these very trying
times.
And because of that, it's actually becoming quite exciting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of
crumbs. I've always loved the idea of crumbs, and I love it because you're so beautifully connected. And the great idea of making it easy for film and television, and basically a lot of things are pre-cleared, because you understand the industry, and you give a platform for new talent, which is where you started.
Exactly. I'm a big believer in new talent. I still find it as exciting. So our little community, one of the things that we're trying to do is work together when we do find something that is fantastic. So we're able to record them in a studio. We're able to protect their rights via a blockchain technology. We're able to make films and document one of the greatest documentary guys in America. So there's a lot of pieces that we can all put together. So we have a thing called Lift 35, and I'll explain that one day. But it's called Lift 35, and so we'll probably launch that in the spring.
Okay.
Or this, the next spring, when the studio's finished and all of that. But meanwhile, we're all working together on lots of different things.
Give us a little hint as to what Lift 35 is, and we'll bring you back when you can explain it fully.
Well, 35. So we're set in the Triangle here in North Carolina, and we're part of the Triangle, which has become a great place. A lot of people are moving here, actually, and it's a great tech place. It's a great home of medicine. I mean, GSK, Glaxo, you've got IBM, you've got Cisco, you've got so many great companies that are here, Lenovo, I mean, many great companies, and you've got many great music tech situations. And one thing that, the big tech thing that happened in North Carolina is that those two brothers created the aircraft, didn't they? They flew the aircraft for the first time. And that took off the first time, 1035. Hence, there's the 35.
Very good.
And lift is to help lift young talent and new ideas, and to lift and help them. Lift 35.
Brilliant. There you go. A world exclusive with the explanation for the next chapter. Ray,
I've probably done very well.
Absolutely. Ray, it's been an absolute delight catching up.
Congratulations
on all the big anniversaries. Happy birthday. Happy 50th birthday coming up in a very short amount of time. And happy birthday for you yesterday. And just to finish on now, I'm so delighted we've had the opportunity to set the record straight on so many fronts. How would you, Ray Williams, like to be remembered?
Oh my gosh, for living a very long time. Oh my gosh, I guess that's a very big question. I really, gosh, that I managed to stay in this business for as long as I have, and at the same time done a little bit of good in it, and made a lot of mistakes like all of us. But I think really I've tried to help talent. I've tried to facilitate and put things together in a positive way rather than a negative way. And as a connector, as somebody that has helped connect situations and help create situations. It's never one person, it's always a team. But I've always, very happy to try and help and lift things off.
Lift being the operative word. Ray, it's been absolute delight. Thank you very much.
Great, Andrew. Thank you.
Enjoy the celebrations over the next few weeks, because I'm sure they go on and on and on.
So I hope to see you soon.
I'm looking forward to it. Take care, Ray. Thanks a lot.
Okay, take care. Lots of love.
Bye. Bye. So there you have it, my good mate Ray Williams, and setting the record straight. Thank you very much to him. Thank you for all of my guests. And if you have any comments or any thoughts, put them in the comment section below, or write to me at lol, L-O-L, at octopustv.com if you'd like to be a guest on the show, or you've got suggestions as to people who might want to set the record straight, might want to question everything, or just coming along for a chat. It'd be great to hear from them as well. In the meantime, I've been Andrew Eborn. You've been fantastic. Thank you very much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.